His innocence died on a snowy mountainside. Can he find it there again after all these years? The Other Land, by Andrea Schlecht. The old man sits gazing at the great mountain of his village. He gazes for hours. The mountain's name is Sul. It is the third highest peak in the land, and at its summit, it splits into two not quite unscalable spears. The old man's eyesight is failing him. He sits in a rocking chair on his back porch. The front porch faces the fjord. His view of the summit has become blurred over the years, and he sees 4, sometimes even 6 peaks. But he can still see its wide base clearly. By a thin waterfall, which flows like silky white hair over the dark rock, he sees a solidly built farmhouse. It is Piot's house. But Piot, his boyhood friend, doesn't live there anymore. Many other houses stand on Sul's gentle lower slope. But Piot's house stands prominently and accusingly in his view. The old man and his wife Gita are among the few of their age in the village of Falith. Once there were others, like Piot a long time ago when they were children. They are gone now, gone to another land beyond the mountain, or possibly within the mountain, who can say which. They left during a rare and luminous instant when Sul, covered with golden light, was the door to. But no. The old man shakes his head to rid himself of idle dreams. That isn't the way it was at all. The old man Yormund thinks back to that day. It takes a child's eyes to create a vision of such beauty and power, the interweaving of colors, the blending of lights. He was 11. He was walking on the path that wriggled along the base of the mountain, looking for chums who, for the moment, had no chores to do. Several new houses, fresh paint, bright colors had sprung up in the shelter of Sul. The day was cloudy. Every part of the sky had a thin, fleecy coating, and one low cloud slid down the mountain to the grass line. Yormund loved the formidable presence of Sul. In it he saw strength, stability, stolid character. He hoped to find Piot, his favorite playmate, loitering in his yard, and he headed toward the thick-walled house by the waterfall. Piot often said he had trouble getting to sleep, unless he could listen to the whisper of the water as it flowed over the rock face. Piot was not in his yard or anywhere else in sight. Yormund walked to the end of the path, then started up Sul's lower slope. A sprinkling of trees, none taller than Yormund himself, girded the bottom of the mountain. Yormund hesitated to go beyond the tree line. It was dangerous to go up too high during cloud cover. One could get lost in a descending mist. Then an opening, like a tunnel, widened in the cloud which lay on the slope. In the thinning of the mist, deep golden sunlight poured through. It was not the light of the sun, he knew. This light transformed everything it illuminated. A trail of brilliant specks glistened in the tunnel, and the sky beyond was no ordinary blue, but a blue with a depth which suggested invigorating air, distinctive energies. The tunnel in the cloud created a brightly lit road over the bare stone of the mountain, and Yormund, all thoughts of danger forgotten, began to stumble toward it. The stone was no longer plain stone. In the otherworldly light he saw great striations of gems. The green ones were surely emeralds, the red ones rubies. Silver and gold rippled among them. But were they truly silver and gold? He would not know until he reached that magical road. He quickened his pace. The light crept over Yormund. He looked at his hands and they seemed strange, new and beautiful in the glow. Then he looked up. Far above the tree line on the mountain's southern slope, a tree grew out of the ground, precious stones. Not one of the stunted Arctic trees, but a 1,000-branched giant, with long leaves, a straight trunk, and huge roots making ridges in the ground. Its shadowless branches, was there shadow in this other land? Were in full bloom, with the blossoms of a size proportionate to everything else. The tips of some of its branches seemed to brush the twin peaks. Yormund started, rubbed his eyes, and peered as hard as he could at those peaks. Crowning the mountain were the 2 great towers of a castle, with several smaller towers and turrets and long battlements in stately symmetry. The architecture involved many domed and bulb-shaped constructions, and it was not at all like the castles of the continent, more like the palaces of the East. Its walls reflected the gold of the ethereal light, and it was as if the branchlets of the tree, which reached toward battlements and entrances, meant to nourish those who dwelled inside with the fruit promised by the blossoms. Who was master of this place, and who were the builders, who could create such an edifice on a nearly unscalable peak? Surely some ancient winged beings destined never to die. Yormund began to run, but some things passed so quickly. Wisps sailed across the tunnel, closing the opening and cutting off the golden light. How long had the vision lasted? A minute? Half a minute? A few seconds? Yormund looked at his hands. There was nothing unusual about them now, and around him all was as before, except that a dream had taken hold of him. He returned shakily to the village. Piot was in his yard now, pushing his little sister around in a wheelbarrow. In a near feverish state, Yormund ran up to him and demanded that they go somewhere to talk privately. Piet tried to send his little sister into the house. Her curiosity piqued, she didn't want to go, but fortunately an older sister came and got her, and the boys found themselves alone. Yormund told Piet about the transformed mountain, the tree, the castle, and the golden light. When he had finished, Piet said thoughtfully, "You know, there's a story my great-grandfather used to tell me about the mountain. Once a year at midsummer," he said, "you can get a glimpse of paradise from the top of Seoul. There's another land there beyond Seoul, paradise or no," Yormund insisted. "It's there and not there, if you know what I mean. And it's not like this land. There's nothing plain or drab in it. Everything is noble and beautiful." Before long, Piet became as excited as Yormund. "I would like to see it too the next time. Do you think we could find it somehow? I don't know, but we ought to watch for it. Maybe it's possible to get to it. Perhaps we could become knights there, on flying steeds." "I never want to be a fisherman like my father," said Piet. "It's a dog's life. If I ever catch a glimpse of that land, I'll be on my way that very moment." "Let's tell the others," Yormund suggested, "and we can all keep our eyes open for it. The next time one of us sees it, he'll tell the rest and we'll all try to get there." The others were all the children of the village, old enough to go where they pleased, well, almost, and young enough not to have to put in a full day's work when not in school. They listened, wide-eyed, as Yormund described his vision, and Piet tried to recall his great-grandfather's story, and they too became infected with the excitement. Afterwards, all of them mentioned how at one time or another they had seen or thought they had seen something strange on the mountain, or something too beautiful to belong in this world. Olaf, a stocky 12-year-old, looked particularly thoughtful. "Maybe what you saw, Yormund, was a faraway land like China or Egypt," he said. "Far away in the ordinary sense, but the mountain is a door Seoul brings it dos. Maybe it's the land your Uncle Peli sailed for." "India," the suggestion agitated Yormund, and he spent a moment deep in his own thoughts. Uncle Peli, who was also his godfather, had left for India 3 years ago, promising many times to write, but no one ever heard from him again. "Remember the stories Peli told us?" said Olaf. "He was going to ride elephants and hunt tigers, and learn how to sit on air above people's heads." "I remember," Yormund said. He also remembered how Uncle Peli had told him he would come back to visit when Yormund had finished school. "I'll tell you what it's like in India," he had said, "and if you like what you hear, then you can come back with me. You don't strike me as the sort to want to stay in this village all your life," he had added. "No, I don't think it's that land," Yormund decided, 1 rupee better. "And it's not on any map. Why can't we go to it right now?" asked a red-haired girl of 9. "Because it's not there right now," Yormund said. "We can get to it only when we can see it. Most of the time, our mountain is like any other mountain. But something happened today, and for a few moments, another land somehow burst through. But the next time one of us sees it, the next time we'll go," Gita, a blonde 10-year-old, finished for him. "We'll go," Yormund repeated, and the others nodded. It was a pact. And as with all children's pacts, they agreed to tell neither their elders nor their smaller brothers and sisters who were too young to climb the mountain. Only they themselves, 26 souls in all, were to go to the Golden Land. For nearly 2 weeks the sun did not come out. A thick gray mantle of cloud hung stubbornly over the mountain, as if to protect the Golden Land from intruders. When sunlight finally squeezed through, it was not of that deep, mellow gold. The sky was a fine blue, but it was not the blue of the magical land. The mountain's twin peaks, as always, looked like the towers of a castle, but it was plain that there was no actual castle. That summer, whenever the mountaintop was framed in cloud with the sun low in the sky, and deep-colored light falling upon cliffs and slopes, Yormund was deluged with false alarms. An excited youngster would come running to say, "It's there. It's there," but Yormund, looking up, would say, "Seoul is very beautiful tonight, but no, that's not it. If you had only seen it then, that one time," and he would leave the rest unspoken. When the end of the rainbow fell on the mountainside one afternoon, at least half the children came running at once. "This is it, isn't it? This must be it," but it was not. Yormund, the only one who had ever seen the other land, could tell at a glance. Yormund watched more than anyone. He dreamed countless dreams of the other land and his life to come in it. Certain things were waiting for him there, he imagined them during sun-filled sleepless nights. A steed, for instance, winged or otherwise swift. A wilderness to be tamed. A vast lake that was more than a lake, an undersea civilization of high-spirited immortals who thrived in its pillared caves and submarine gardens. It was all waiting for him. He only needed to see the way again. At the end of August that year, autumn arrived with a few stray snowflakes. Yormund was helping his mother in the potato patch behind their house. Most of the potatoes were larger than pebbles. It had been a good season. When Yormund's infant sister, just born the previous winter, began to cry, his mother wiped her hands on her apron and hurried into the house. Yormund kept collecting the potatoes into sacks, thinking with some sadness that the fine warm summer was coming to an end. Neatly all the snow had disappeared from Sul. Only one persistent patch remained in the shadows between the twin peaks. Yormund looked up at the mountain. A faint mist drifting from the east approached it. Thicker clouds followed. But he should have known as soon as he saw those brilliant points of light glancing off the mist. The mist flowed over the mountaintop, veiling it lightly, not quite concealing it, and when the mist lifted, there finally, miraculously, it was. The tree, still decked in blossoms, seemed even taller than before, sending its dome of branches into the sky, standing as if on guard at the mountain castle. And the emeralds, the rubies, the gold and silver. There was no time to lose. Another mist was heading for the mountain's summit, and who could say whether it would wipe out the vision? Perhaps forever? Yormund ran through the village, calling the names of his friends. He whispered to each one he met, and each one gazed at the mountain, saw what it had become, and set out to find another child to share the destiny. "What shall we take with us?" one of the girls asked. "Nothing, there's no time," Yormund said. "Hurry!" Soon a large group was gathered at the foot of the mountain. They could not take their eyes from the scene above them. The only one not among them was Gita, who was sick in bed with a hacking cough. "All of you go now," Yormund said to them. "I'll get Gita. We can't go without her. She'll never be sick again in the other land." As the children began to scramble up the slope, Yormund ran to Gita's house. She was sitting up in her bed. Her parents and brothers were all away in the family's fishing boat. "It's today, isn't it?" she yes and asked, resigned, regretful, expecting to be left behind. "You're going too," he said. "I'm not going without you. Quick, I'll wait outside while you dress." As Yormund waited, he could see his friends ascending the mountain. They were moving quickly, impelled by the beauty of the vision. A thick mist was only minutes away, but they were already at the edges of the golden light. Gita came out sloppily dressed and coughing into a handkerchief. Yormund put his arm around her shoulder and led her to the base of the mountain. The first mist was descending. They ran how they ran, with Gita coughing at every tum, and then it happened so fast. A second mist mingled with the first and swallowed the mountain, swallowed their vision of beauty. Like some dragon who would eat the sun, it devoured their dream. Before giving up, Yormund realized that the mountain under his feet was no longer the one he had so yearned to climb. He felt no warmth in his soul, saw no brightness in the grasses pressed by their feet, and the rock that broke through was plain gray rock. The castle and the land of gold and magic were gone. He and Gita were left behind. A search for the children began the next hour. Someone had seen them on the mountain. Yormund and Hela were questioned together. "We ran to see what they were all up to," they said, "and then the clouds came, and we had to tum back." They said nothing more. The secret had to be safeguarded, because someday, perhaps. The next morning, a guide who knew most of the mountains in the country was summoned from another village up the fjord. With a small party of parents, he searched all the slopes of Suwon-e and the wide passes on either side to no avail. At the end of a week, funeral services were held, for surely the children could not have survived the autumn nights in the damp and cold of the mountains. In the days that followed, Yormund thought of nothing but his friends. He imagined them playing on the shores of the lake that was no ordinary lake, feasting inside the gold-tinged walls of the castle, picking the fruit of the great tree from the castle's battlements, heading inland to a wild country where beasts of legend had their lairs. Yormund had led his friends to this world within worlds, and yet he had not reached it himself. No bodies were found. Not so much as a shoe or a piece of ribbon from a girl's hair was found. Secretly, Yormund was glad. The complete disappearance of his friends seemed to lend substance to his dreamland, but once or twice, in an unguarded moment, a hideous fear clawed at his mind. The years ahead were lonely for Yormund and Gita. They missed their friends terribly, but they continued to hope that someday they would join them. On clear winter nights when the twin peaks stood silhouetted against a moon full and golden, the otherland sea met about tea burst into being. The summer sunlight from time to time seemed to strip Sul of its ordinariness and expose inner wonders. But these glimpses came less frequently as Yormund's childhood passed, and eventually, he was no longer certain of what he saw during those precious moments. In the year Yormund turned 18, they ended altogether. In July, a team of foreign mountain climbers came to Falith to climb first the treacherous twin peaks of Sul, and then the snow covered the peak of Kurgal, the highest mountain in the land, located 3 days' walking distance from Sul. Altair their triumph over Sul, which was observed by almost the entire village. Many villagers saw them off on the morning returned, to of their departure for Kurgal. The team weeks later with the news that they had successfully climbed the peak of Kurgal. And also, with the news of a shocking discovery. In a narrow pass between two of the smaller mountains on the far side of Sul, they had found 24 skeletons, most of them small. The skeletons were strewn inside several shallow caves. Two of the climbers guided a party from the village to the spot so that the remains could be brought back for burial. Yormund was among them, for he had to see for himself the vast extent of his guilt. He had to fill his mind, finally, with the truth and crush once and for all the deceitful and dangerous dreams of his childhood. The sky appeared to darken as he saw the land to which he had driven his boyhood friends. He had driven them to the land of death. Some coins, buttons, and buckles lay among the bones. He recognized Piet's pocket knife. Those treasured glimpses into a land of magic had been delusion. The bodies were buried in one grave, over which was erected a large monument, with each of the names engraved on the column below the statue of a cherub. What surprised everyone most was how far the children had gotten from the village before they succumbed. The pain of the loss surfaced again. Parents and relatives wept. Yormund cried in Gita's arms for many nights. She knew the full horror of his part in those deaths, but she did not recoil from him. When he wanted to declare his guilt to the whole village, she soothed him, insisting they had all had a part in it, and they had all built up the delusion, and she persuaded him not to add to everyone's grief by telling the grim story. Not long after, he and Gita were married. Although Gita's health was never the best, they had 7 children. Since they had deprived the village of so many of its young ones, they would have all the children they would have all the children they could. Yormund went into debt for several years to buy himself a boat. He became a fisherman like his father, and most of the men in the village and the world around him grew dull and tiresome. He had to work hard to wrest a meager living from the sea. His boat was small, and he was never able to afford a larger one. He found a dullness in the summer blue of the sky. It never seemed quite as blue as it had been on certain days he now tried to forget. The fields of Arctic roses and saxifrage seemed but faded imitations of something ethereal and no longer attainable, and the palatial fjord mountains, in which he had once seen the hand of some ancient folk, were diminished in his eyes. Uncle Pelle never returned, and his sister, Yormund's mother, dreamed that she saw him dead. Yormund tried hard not to think of the land of his visions, for those thoughts were painful. But he did not always succeed. He had imagined so much honor, courage, and love in that land. But here in this dismal village, where was honor among the stinking fish? Where were courage and love? Courage was the desperate striving with the sea to fill hungry mouths. And love was no more than a struggle for comfort and warmth under the eiderdown. But in the other land, in the Golden Land, Gita would be his shrewd, sensuous, not quite beautiful consort, and he would be. The old MSN watches 2 of his grandsons squabble over a wooden pony he carved last year. He reminds himself to make another pony. Didn't he see a suitable piece of wood in the shed just the other day? But he is too tired to get up and look. The sun forces a little of its light through 2 cloud banks. Seoul's twin peaks are embedded in a billowing shroud. The old man thinks of the towers underneath, the ones he used to imagine fashioned by legendary builders who possess this land in a way he can never possess it. The shroud thins. Wisps fall away from it. The wind is from the sea, but today the old man cannot smell the sea in it. There is another smell, sweet and aromatic, but subtle like an image at the edge of a dream. As the moments pass, the old man's rocking chair creaks and groans. He tries to identify that subtle and intriguing smell. A new kind of coffee freshly brewed? Fresh-cut hay? Pungent tropical flowers? He gives up. The disintegrating shroud splits slowly in 2 to reveal finally the turreted mountaintop, dear and sunlit. The old man starts. He sees more than just the naturally formed towers. He sees a lofty castle in its entirety, rounded structures in its architecture, and each detail sharpened by golden light. He sees a great tree, taller than the mountain itself. It is the world of his visions, the world of his dreams, even more beautiful now than he remembers it from his boyhood. He stands up. His eyes grow, bright with wonder. As if of their own accord, his feet begin to take him toward the mountain, up the gentle lower slope, past Piot's old house. At first he walks. Then his legs begin to feel younger, his blood warmer. His muscles feel strong. He breaks into a slow run and crosses the flower-studded meadow above the waterfall. The ewes with their lambs flee as he passes near. How could a mere heap of bones have shattered his faith? His boyhood friends are there, of course, in the other land, and soon he will be with them. The split in the cloud grows wider. The 2 mists begin to crawl down the mountain. He remembers Gita. What is she doing just now? Perhaps cooking the evening meal or taking clothes down from the line. He cannot go back for her, not this time. She will find her own way soon. The old man reaches the grass line and bounds beyond it. The mosses glimmer like emeralds on the stony slopes. Softly, a few rays of the other sun single him out. They warm his skin and smooth it. The air grows colder, but he feels no chill. He pauses. He is scarcely a stone's throw from the border. As he pauses, clouds begin to swirl around Seoul again. He looks at the tree. It sends delicate branches into the sky, and he is so close now that he sees its fruit, huge and round and plentiful. Once again, he pushes ahead. The slope is steep now, but he has grown stronger than he ever was. He allows himself only one look back and sees a wall of mist. The clouds have dosed up behind him, and he is almost there. The end.